Right. Hey, listen, guys. We're running a little late tonight. We've had our guest had some technical difficulty, but we are back, and he is in the backstage, and he's ready to chat with us for a few minutes. And I'm with my co-host, LaDonna Sherwood and Francis Larkin.
Hello.
Hello, how you doing? How's everybody?
Great.
Well, we're starting a little late, but that's okay. We've got Randy Feldshau here tonight as our special guest. He will be visiting with us in about 60 minutes, but we want to let you know that we've got some things going on. This coming, we got a lot of things going on. This coming Sunday, we've got Dr. Richard Price. He's going to be the historian and tell us all about the beginning of the Pear Orchard, the history of the Pear Orchard, and also the history of the beginning of Hebert High School. So he's going to be with us on Sunday at 7:00. And we've got some. Who you have on Tuesday?
I think Tuesday is open, huh?
No, it's not. I text you.
Hold on a minute.
Yes, we're going to have Chris Durio on Tuesday.
Okay.
Right. And we're going to have Thursday. You text me on Thursday, and
we're going to have Robin Mouton.
Robin Mouton, that's right. Okay.
And then the next Sunday, we're going to have LaShawn Proctor. So, yeah.
That's right. So we've got a full schedule for March, and believe it or not, we have the notorious Mike Getz will be with us on the 28th of this month. So we've got a full slate going on. Okay. So, guys, just hang in. We'll be right back. Give us about 30 seconds. We'll have our special guest, Randy Feldshau, running for re-election for the city council at large position. Welcome to Knowledge is Power Podcast Live with your host, Tony Redford, and my co-host, LaDonna Sherwood and Francis Larkins.
Knowledge is Power Podcast Live starts now.
You got it.
Knowledge is Power Podcast Live is a platform to share important information by educating Southeast Texas African American communities with valuable information on health, education, finance, politics, and business. We pride ourselves on keeping our hand on the pulse of this community and keeping you abreast of what is going on in and around the Golden Triangle.
Also, Knowledge is Power Podcast Live is now on Facebook, Spotify, iHeartRadio, YouTube, LinkedIn, Twitter, Apple, iTunes, and on our new website, www.knowledgeispowerpodcast.live. Okay, great, good. Let's bring our guests, Mr. Randy Feldshau.
How are you?
How are you, sir?
I'm good. It's
good,
to be with you, Tony, Francis, and LaDonna tonight. And to those of you that are listening, we are running late, but please know that was my problem. I had some technical difficulties on my end. I do appreciate Tony and his team being patient with me and waiting for me.
I'm going to have to ask you, how did you get on?
The grace of God.
Yeah, okay. All right. Francis.
Yes, sir. Mr. Feldshau, how are you tonight?
I'm doing well. It's good to hear your voice and see your picture on the screen.
Yes, sir. You too. I'm super excited for you to be with us this evening. And I want you to go ahead and first tell the people, our viewers that are listening, a little bit about yourself. Of course, we know that you hold a seat on the city council currently, but just tell us a little bit about yourself, if you will.
Well, as you mentioned, I'm Randy Feldshau. I was born here in Beaumont, raised in this area. I've been in full-time ministry now for 40 years. I pastor One City Church here in Beaumont, which is the old Cathedral in the Pines Christian Center. Many people in Beaumont remember Pastor Dabney coffee with Pastor Dabney early in the morning. We changed the name of the church here last year in 2020 to One City Church. I've been there now going on 15 years. I've been serving on council for 2 years now. I'm finishing up my first term, and I'm running for re-election to my second term as city council member at large.
Okay. Well, tell us a little bit about your seat currently. When you're talking about the governing body of the city council, there are currently 2 seats for at large. Am I correct on that?
There is. Our council is set up with 1 mayor that represents the entire city, 2 at-large positions that represent the entire city, and of course 4 wards. At this time, because W.O. Pate is running for mayor, that creates an open seat, and so I'm running as the only incumbent, and there is an open seat. And so city council member at large does represent the entire city, and everyone within Beaumont has the opportunity to vote for them. And please remember this, that you do get to vote 4 times. You get to vote once for the mayor, once for the ward you live in, and then there's 2 seats for at large, so you can cast 2 votes. And for many, many years, citizens have been told to only vote 3 times. And so I know there's an argument. There are some candidates who will tell you when it comes to voting at large to only vote 1 time, because if you vote once for me and then once for someone else, you cancel out the vote. Personally, I do not encourage that. I encourage the citizens to cast every vote that is due them, and that's 4 votes. Once for the mayor, once for the ward you live in, and then 2 for the at-large council members. I encourage everybody to vote 4 times.
Now, because I saw a post, so I really want to get some clarity on that. Now, you're saying that the 1 vote does not cancel out the other vote, that we do have 2 votes. That is true. So they are tallying all of the votes, right?
Well, yes. I mean, I'm not going to argue the fact that if you vote for me and then you vote for someone else, that there's a debate there on does that help me or hurt me? And I'm not going to get into that debate, but the fact is, legally, you can vote 4 times. Okay. Once for the mayor, once for the ward you live in, and then you get to cast 2 votes for at large. And I personally think you should cast every vote that is due you. And so there's a number of us running. There's me, AJ, James Eller, there's Elias, there's Brian Nevo, and then Qureshi. So there's 6 of us running. And out of those 6 people, you get to pick 2.
Okay. Thank you for clearing that up. LaDonna, did you have a follow-up question to that?
I do. Can you tell us a little bit about the duties of a councilman? Because sometimes we don't know what the city council does and what is your job exactly.
Well, there are different forms of city government. Ours is a city manager, council-led city government. So that means that the city council, comprised of the mayor, 2 at-large, and 4 wards, the 7 of us meet on a regular basis, and we're the ones as a legislative body that will set policy, that will set city ordinances that address the budget. We only hire 3 people, the city manager, the city clerk, and the city attorney. Then everyone else, all the department heads and all the employees fall underneath the city manager, the city clerk, and the city attorney. And that group of people, there's 1,200 employees at City Hall. That group of people administrate the city on a day-to-day basis. So the council doesn't run the city. The council sets policy, city ordinances, budget. We're big picture. We're a legislative body, and we empower the city manager and the staff to execute that vision that we set for the city. And we're there to represent the constituents of Beaumont, to listen to them, their needs and their concerns, and to take those needs and concerns to City Hall, and then to empower City Hall to execute programs and policies that will address those challenges and address those needs.
Yes, sir.
And that's where, let me say, guys, that's where we get in trouble whenever city council members start trying to insert themselves in the administration of the city, run the city. Listen, when I contact City Hall, I call the city manager, and then he puts me in touch with the department head. But I do not go directly to that department head, because when I do that, you're causing confusion.
Right.
I'm not a boss. I don't run the city. The city manager runs the city. Now, technically, I can call the city clerk and I can call the city attorney directly because we hire those three people. But normally, I don't even do that. I call the city manager and I say, listen, I have a concern. Let's talk about it. And then I go through him. For me, that's protocol. And that's how you keep confusion from coming in. But when a city council member starts trying to give direction to employees, that's when we have a problem. And as far as I'm concerned, well, it's not as far as I'm concerned, it's a fact. When the city council member does that, they've crossed the line, and they need to back up, because they're not there to administrate on a daily basis and run the city.
Well, can I ask you, can you give us, I guess, an idea how at-large differs from the ward council members? What does the at-large duties actually do? We know that what the wards do. What does at-large do exactly?
Well, I think it's probably just the same, but just it encompasses the entire city. I have a responsibility to represent all the people of Beaumont in all 4 wards. And so when I make a decision and I cast a vote, I have to consider all the people of Beaumont and how that will impact them. I have to look at all 4 wards. I have to look at the demographic of Beaumont. It's 48% Black, 33% white, 14% Hispanic, and then 5 to 6% other. And I have to look at the entire city. I represent everybody, whether they're Republican, Democrat, religious, non-religious, atheist, agnostic, it doesn't matter. I represent all the people of Beaumont. And when I cast a vote, I have to pause for a moment and ask the question, how will this impact the people of Beaumont? So it's more challenging. Right now, I'm running for at large, and I have to campaign in all 4 wards. Whereas the others, whether it's Taylor Neal with Ward 1 or Mike Getz and Mile Haynes in Ward 2 and the others, they only focus within that ward. But I have to look at the entire city. And it's more challenging to get elected. And it takes more work. And I'll be honest with you, it takes a lot more money. And I hate to mention money, but we understand that it does take finances in order to get your message out there and to be able to get into office.
Absolutely.
I've got a question about equal and equity, okay? Because oftentimes things in the city are distributed equally, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's equitable. Give me a little synopsis on where you stand on that.
Well, LaDonna, when I first came into office, I went and sat down with the city manager. And I said, look, as a city council member at large, I want to ask the question, how are we spending our money when it comes to road improvements? He said, well, council member, we try to take the money and we look at the city and we try to disperse it across the city and impact all 4 wards. Okay. I thought, well, that's great. I mean, we're trying to be fair and equitable. But as I served on the council and I began to drive around the city, and sometimes I drive around the city just to look at the condition of people's lives, whether it's Pine Street, whether it's Hillbeg, whether it's the avenues, Pear Orchard, South Park, wherever it may be. Sometimes I just drive around and I look at the conditions in which people are living. And I come to realize that what we've been doing really is not fair, because you can't be equitable until you start equal. And so really there has to be a disproportionate amount of money spent in the wards that are older and the street or the infrastructure is in disrepair, because the streets in the West End are not in the same shape as the streets, let's say in Pear Orchard or the avenues or off of Pine Street. I went one day down, I was doing flood relief and with Harvey, and I went down off of Corley we were helping a an elderly widow woman that was flooded. And if we didn't help her, she wasn't going to get back in there. So we went in there and we rebuilt her home completely. And I went around the corner and I drove in front of Michael Cooper's church, which I had never seen before. And I called him up and I said, hey, Michael, your street is like a third world country. And I was embarrassed. As a city council member, I was embarrassed. And that's when I realized you can't be equitable until you start equal. And so to answer your question, we've got to rethink our approach to the streets of Beaumont.
Mm-hmm.
I appreciate that.
Well, let me ask you now. I had not seen this happen in the city of Beaumont because we talked about Ward. You talked about Ward 4 and Ward 3, who has the oldest infrastructure. And did I hear you say that you tried to make sure that they get more funds to that area?
No, I was saying when I first got on council and I sat down with the city manager, I asked him, how do we decide the disbursement of monies when it comes to road repair? And he said, we try to make sure that all the 4 wards are addressed, like 25 million on Concord and then 35 million on Washington Boulevard. And then other things, the Dowling Road, which that's really a different story because a chunk of that was federal money. But he was just talking about how that we tried to be fair and equitable across the board. And in the beginning, because of my ignorance, I thought, well, that's great. I mean, you're trying to be fair. But as I got into serving on council, I began to understand that because there are parts of our city that are older, the streets are older. Right. We have over 800 miles of roads here in Beaumont. That's like from Beaumont to El Paso. And so I began to realize that, you know, maybe we need to stop and realize that there are parts of our city, because of their age, they've just been there longer, and the streets are in disrepair, that we need to have more monies going into those areas than we do, let's say, in maybe Ward 1 or Ward 2. Right. Because they're not as old or as in disrepair as some of the other wards. And so I've had to rethink my approach to the disbursement of monies within the city of Beaumont.
Now, since you rethinked it, now how are you going to implement it?
Well, as we begin to raise new money, whether it's through borrowing money or whatever means it may come about by, I've got to, as a council member, speak up and make sure that I represent all the constituents of Beaumont, because I represent everybody and not just one ward. I have to represent them.
Tell me, what has prepared you for this position? Tell us a little bit about what makes you feel like you're prepared for this job.
You know, I've had 40 years of full-time ministry. People have often asked me, how did you make the transition from being a pastor of a local church to being a city council member? And I've told them many times that it was a very easy transition for me. You have to understand that I'm not a politician, okay? I'm a leader in this community. What I do on city council, I was actually doing in and through my church before I ever knew I'd be on city council. I was doing things such as hurricane relief. I've been doing hurricane relief for years, going all the way back to 2004. I didn't just start this. I've been doing this for many, many years. But here in Beaumont, going back to Hurricane Ike and other storms, and then Harvey. With Harvey and Imelda alone, we did over $4 million of rebuilding and refurbishing homes here in this area, to the tune of about 138 homes that we actually went in and rebuilt and restored those people and got them back in their homes. With things like Not in My City, a new ministry called One City Cares, addressing things like violence in the streets, sex trafficking, homelessness, addressing poverty, trying to work with BISD. All of these things I was doing before I ever knew I would be on city council. I'm doing it while I'm on city council, and I'll be doing it after I get off of city council. It's not going to change with me. Of course, we can talk about working with budgets. We can talk about having employees. We can talk about working with my council at my church, just like I have a council at City Hall. We can talk about leading people, bringing people to a consensus, and then leading them forward with a vision. We can talk about a lot of things, but let me just say this. People have to remember that this nation, if you go back and study its history, many of the men that were involved in the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, our founding fathers were ministers. There was a time when it was understood and expected for ministers to transition from the pulpit to the podium, just like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. did. It was a natural transition because the pastors were the leaders in the community. They were the voice of the city. They were the conscience of the people. And they helped people. They lifted people up and helped those that could not help themselves. And so to go from preacher to politician at one time in this nation was just expected, and it was accepted. 20% of the statutes within our national federal capital in Washington, D.C. are ministers. And we forgot that in this nation, that ministers at one time were heavily involved in politics. And personally, I think it's time to get back to that because I care about people. Black, white, brown, male, female, Democrat, Republican, religious or non-religious. I care about people. And I have a history to prove that, where I'm interested in bettering the lives of the people of Beaumont.
I got a question since you said that, Pastor, and I'm glad. I meant to bring this up with another pastor the other night we had on, but given the current climate and the division and the culture of what's going on, oftentimes as preachers, the message is to kind of forgive and move forward. But when there's division and there needs to be some rectifying or recompense and things of that nature for issues that are unacceptable, do you have a proposal for people that have been treated unjustly and unfairly, particularly in the Black and brown community, and just division period? How do you propose we combat some of these tougher issues?
Yeah, boy, that could take a while. When I first came to Cathedral in the Pines back in 06, I stepped into a church that this is not an indictment against any former pastor or any person. But when I first stepped in that church, immediately I encountered a culture in Southeast Texas where I understood, it was my understanding, that the Black community did not feel welcomed at my church. And I began to discover that there was a history with my church. And so I began to preach from my pulpit that racism is a sin. And I began to call it out for what it is. And I began to deal with that issue. And I began to challenge my church. And I hired the first African American to ever work at that church on staff. I hired the first, and actually she came in as an administrative assistant, and now she's one of my pastors. And since then, I've hired others. And so I began to change the culture of my house to significant loss, where I lost a lot of people. And I had to rebuild my congregation because I dared to step out and to address that issue. In 2016, July 4th of 2016, that week, when we had the shooting of Sterling in Baton Rouge, Castile and St. Paul, and the ambush of the police officers in Dallas, that week, I stood up and dealt with a message about the churches taking personal responsibility for the blood that's in our streets. Rather, because it's not white blood, black blood, blue blood, it's all red blood. We're one human race. We're not a black race, a white race, or a brown race. We're a human race. And I began to preach, and out of that came that statement, not in my city. And we began to deal with racial reconciliation. And we've been a church of trying to be a pioneer and set the tone and challenge other churches. Just 2 weeks ago, we, for the first time, my church is 100 years old, but for the first time on a Sunday, we celebrated Black History Month. And that had never been done in my church before, and I did it. And I brought in a special speaker, a lady out of Dallas, to Haviland Ford. Her and her husband are just a wonderful couple, and she did a phenomenal job. And I continue to challenge my church. I've started Hispanic churches. I've done multiple things with the Black community, and I will continue to do that and try to set an example for this city.
I appreciate that, Pastor.
I hope I'm answering your question.
You did.
You have very thoroughly. And so I hear that that's one of the issues that are near and dear to you that you're kind of standing in the gap on. Is there any other issues here in Beaumont that you wish to address or find a reprieve for? That's loaded.
Every candidate is going to tell you the same thing because it's good and right that we have to continue addressing our infrastructure. We have to continue addressing our public works. Everybody talks about sewer lines. We've already repaired 50% of the sewer lines in Beaumont, and we're trying to work on the other 50%. Every candidate is going to tell you the same thing, that we need to support the first responders, fire, police, and EMS. Every candidate is going to tell you the same thing, that we need to improve city services, and all of this stuff are things that I focus on, and that's important to me. But there's three things that I'll mention tonight. And number one, we have got to find a way to address the divisiveness that's on our city council. You have to understand that debate is good and right. Debate is what causes two opposing forces to come together and find compromise and find the best solution for the citizens of this great nation. Right. But we should debate as statesmen and agree to disagree without becoming disagreeable. We have digressed from debating as statesmen. Now we specialize in character assassination. Right. That's a tragedy in this nation. I preached in my church, and you can check it on my archives. You can find it. I preached in my church in February of 2016 in that first presidential campaign between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. And I preached to my church that I was greatly concerned about the divisive spirit that was being unleashed on this nation. And in the last 4 years, we've seen it. I've seen it. You've seen it. And we all were heartbroken on January the 6th as we watched that far right extreme group of people storm the capital of this great nation and kick down its doors and break in its windows. And it broke my heart, as it broke many people's hearts, whether they're Republican or Democrat. And I have dealt with this issue here in Beaumont to the best of my ability. Much of what I have done has been behind the curtain in trying to address the divisiveness that creates a dysfunctional council that needs to learn diplomacy and learn how to work together. I have, and I will continue to challenge this council to disagree without being disagreeable. The other issue that we've got to address is we've got to find a way to attract a diversity of industry to this area so that we can keep the younger demographic. Beaumont's been stuck at 118,000 since 1960. As a pastor, I see it all the time. My kids, they graduate from high school, they go off to college, then they come back 4 years later and they say, Pastor, I'm leaving. I said, where are you going? They go, I'm going to Dallas, I'm going to Houston, I'm going to San Diego. I go, why? And they go, because I don't like the quality of life. Yeah. So we've got to bring in a diversity of industry. If you don't want to work in the refinery, BISD, or healthcare, which are the three top employers of this area, you're in trouble. And so if you want to get out of that, you don't have much to choose from. So we've got to bring in a diversity of industry through opportunity zone, tax abatements, tax incentives, and so forth. So we've got to do that. The other thing that I'm, of course, concerned about is trying to address the racial tension that's in our city. When I talk to white people, they tell me if you'll quit talking about it, it'll just go away. And that makes much sense as thinking that if you don't talk about the cancer that's in your body, somehow it's going to disappear. When I talk to the Black community, they tell me, Pastor, it's there. And we appreciate you having the courage to stand up and address it. And so I have and will continue to try to address this issue within the city of Beaumont. We also need to talk, of course, about the infrastructure and the public works and the city services and how we should do everything with excellence. But I can assure everyone that's listening to this, I'm at City Hall a lot, and I talk to these people, and I can tell you that these people are good people, and they're doing the best they can. All that stuff you're reading on social media, you need to understand that much of that is either a half-truth, partial truth, or a flat-out lie. And people will take things and twist it and put it on social media, and just because it's on Facebook doesn't make it true.
Yes.
You need to call your council member. You need to call council member at large, or you need to call the mayor, or go sit down with the city manager. You'd be shocked to find out the true facts of this city and how hard your city is working for you. But there's a lot of stuff that's being put out there that's just not true.
2 years ago, I can recall you spoke on diversity in the industry, bringing that to our area. Now, you've been in office for 2 years now. How long you think it's going to take? What are your plans to bring, to help bring or promote diverse industry here in the area?
Well, first of all, I will tell you that when I first started, Tony, when I first campaigned, you and I campaigned together, okay?
Mm-hmm.
You were running for at large. And when I first started campaigning and I won, of course, I went into City Hall as a newbie with all these grandiose dreams and ideas, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Great vision that I want to change the city.
Right.
And I went in, and the first thing I encountered was how limited city really is. How do you get a company from San Antonio to relocate to the city of Beaumont? How do you do that? That's a challenge. And so sitting here today, I still hold to the same vision that we've got to find a way to be attractive, okay? Attractive to these companies. And we do that, as I mentioned earlier, by offering to them like downtown area. We did to the city manager, and I asked him after I got in office, can we look into declaring downtown area, applying for and declaring downtown Beaumont an opportunity zone? And he did that. We can use tax incentives and tax abatements to attract companies here. One of the other problems we have, though, that I've encountered is that companies will say, I'm interested, but yet your school district is a challenge for me. Now, I'm not trying to blame BISD. Dr. Allen and these teachers, they're doing the best they can, okay? I get that. But we all understand that our school district has its challenges. And whether it's true or not, the perception across Texas is that BISD is a substandard school district. And so when these companies, when you talk to them, they'll say to you, how do I relocate my employees there when they tell me I do not want to put my kids in your school district? And so that's a challenge. So we have got to change the narrative of Beaumont. And I said that in the last campaign. I'll say it again in this campaign. We have got to find a way to change the narrative, to change the storyline of Beaumont. And that's one of the things that I believe council can do. And that's why in this election, we need more than just managers that can manage ideals and projects, but we need leaders that can inspire people, leaders that can make people feel good about their city, leaders that can go to San Antonio and sit down with a company and say, come to Beaumont. Beaumont has a lot to offer. Move to Beaumont. There's opportunity there. There's labor force. There's empty buildings in downtown Beaumont that's just waiting for you to move in. That's an opportunity zone. There's a historical district where there's tax incentives and tax abatement. So we have got to get aggressive and going after these companies and trying to get them to consider Beaumont. Now, last year, 2020, COVID-19, there was nothing going to happen last year. Nothing. That last year was a washout. The year before that, we're dealing with Imelda. I personally have been fighting Harvey, Imelda, COVID-19, and it's been a challenge. Like I mentioned, I pulled in through Harvey 1,200 volunteers from across America and housed them at my church and raised over $4 million for flood relief through Harvey and Imelda. And it's been a tough few years. So the bulk of my administration on council has been dealing with Harvey, Imelda, COVID-19, and behind the scene, the divisiveness that is on council. That's not an excuse. It's just a reality.
Do you feel that the divisiveness that is presented at times on city council has caused a stumbling block, if you will?
I think this council spends way too much time with internal conflict as opposed to
hey, I'm gonna stop you right there.
Come on.
Now, I'm going to ask you to start that all over again because I want to make sure you know what you're saying. All right, now go ahead.
Slowly, Pastor, slowly.
I had to say that, but listen, you are correct. You are definitely correct, but I want to hear it again. It sounds so good you're saying it.
I'll say it this way.
Okay.
Right or wrong, I'm not one to get on social media and we'll call it out people, attack people, or expose people, or expose what I'm doing behind the scene.
Right.
Some people say, Randy, you need to blow your horn a little bit more. And that just goes against my nature. But I can tell you the last 2 years, I have spent more time behind the curtain trying to promote unity, trying to address the divisiveness, confronting individuals. Look, I'm a pastor. I've spent a lifetime confronting people in private, confronting people and challenging people, appealing to their better angels within and believing in people and trying to get them to rise to their full potential. And so I have spent much of my time on city council dealing with conflict, personality conflict, divisiveness, internal conflict. I've spent way too much time. And this council needs to take its energy and come together as a team, debate issues all day long as statesmen. Let's debate issues. Let's agree to disagree without being disagreeable. And then let's find a compromise. And then let's pull the city together to a consensus and move them forward with a vision to better the lives of our people. But when we get up in all this silliness that we get caught up in, all this fighting, this internal conflict, social media and attacking one another, these political sites that are attacking one another and trying to undermine each other, let me tell you who suffers. You get on social media, and whoever you are that does this on social media, and you attack me, you go right ahead. Take your best shot. But let me tell you who you're hurting. You're hurting the citizens of Beaumont. They're the ones that suffer because much of what you say is a half truth, a partial truth, or a flat out lie. And it's undermining our council. It's undermining our leadership. It's undermining our city. And everybody needs to realize what social media is. On one side of that coin, it can be very powerful to instruct people, to teach people, to connect people. But on the other side, it's very destructive. and it undermines good people and it tears people down and it's undermining our city. And the people that at the end of the day, the people that suffer and lose is the average citizens out there on the street.
And I agree with you. If I don't agree with you on nothing else, I agree with you on that. But let me go here with you. I'm dive deep here for a minute, and we're going to come back for some more questions here. Back of last year, we talked about the city. It came up on the city agenda, and I'm going to ask you about this. Why did you change your vote on the removal of the federal statute, and do you regret it? Are you okay with it?
Why did I change my vote on the Confederate statute?
The removal of the Confederate statute.
I never changed it.
You didn't?
I always supported.
You supported that.
At first, I approached the ideal of taking the statute and rewording it. Okay.
Mhm.
And changing it from a statue honoring a Confederate soldier to a statue recognizing the sons of Texas that fought in the Civil War, both North and South. Okay. And change the verbiage on the plaque that would just acknowledge a part of our history that we can't get away from, that our sons fought in the Civil War. There was, I think, 2,600 Texans that fought on the side of the North. Okay. And just acknowledge the fact that this was a dark time in our history. And as far as I'm concerned, Texas fell on the wrong side of that issue. Okay. But it was presented to me that that wasn't enough, that would not address the issue. So I went to Alderman Samuel. He and I discussed it. He made the motion. I seconded it to have the statue removed, relocated to a place, I think, in Fort Worth. So I only voted one time. And I never changed my vote.
Well, and that's the highest a debate among councilmen should be. Without the bickering and fighting and divisiveness that we have every Tuesday.
Let me tell you how that came about.
But a shit show every Tuesday. Besides not getting ready to do the things we need to get productive in the city, we're bickering and fighting among each other. And I understand that what you have to do to kind of get in between there and try to work with them all to come to a common ground. But
because
the people of the city are tired of it, and we're already divided. So we're tired of it.
Absolutely, I'm sick of it. I'm tired of it. I'm tired of the fighting. I'm tired of the social media attacking each other and tearing each other down. Because again, you do what you want to do. I don't read that. Very seldom do I ever read that stuff. I'm not going to get on there and play that silly game with these people. But what bothers me is that the average citizen of Beaumont is the one that loses because we're not spending our time and our energy. We're not coming together as a team to get things done for the people of Beaumont.
Well, answer this question when you got 1 minute. I'm going to the comment board. Girls, ladies, or do you have anything you want to ask?
No, he's doing a good job. We by him being on council, we don't have to ask all the.
No, okay, great. Let me go to the comment board because I want to make.
Wanted to try to chat. I'm glad that we did it like this because it worked out better for us to kind of just talk about some things that we wanted to address.
Right. So, Pastor, I have a comment. We go to the comment board. We in our last half of our show, and you got 1 minute. That's a minute and a half to answer the question. Okay, so it won't be long. So I want to make sure we answer everyone's questions. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Kendall Perkins is asking, what is your stance or vision for the city transit system?
Well, when you look at our city buses, sometimes you'll see 2, 3, 4 people on there. So I've asked the question, why can't we take our city buses and just buy something smaller like a people mover that would better accommodate the citizens of Beaumont? That would make more sense. Continue with the transit system, but just reduce that vehicle down to something smaller, but we can't. The federal money that we get to buy those vehicles, they dictate that we buy those huge buses that a city our size, I don't think we need. So there's just nothing we can do.
Okay, go to another. Let's see here. Are there federal dollars available Let's see here. Let me get it here. Are there federal dollars available for the bleeded areas like the Ward 4s and the Ward 2s? I'm sorry, the Ward 3s, the Ward 4s.
Yeah, we're constantly looking for and applying for grant money, federal money, to address issues within the city. I know right now they're working on some monies to address some of the drainage and sewer issues within the Pear Orchard area. So yes, there is monies, and the city is constantly trying to find these monies to bring into our city to address these issues. That's why I mentioned earlier that even the Dowling Road, much of that money was federal money, and it was much of that, to my understanding, because that was before I got on council, that was dictated by the government as far as how we spent it, where we spent it, and so forth.
While we're on this topic, I just kind of want to give us a little thought on the downtown area, trying to revitalize and bring that up to do something with it instead of just falling down. Do you have any opinion?
But I have been, and I continue to work on that issue. People have to remember that about 22 of the properties in downtown Beaumont are owned by one individual.
Yes.
And so we have to try to work with that person. Number two, that the downtown area is going to succeed out of a partnership between civic and private, or civic, the city, and private industry. We've got to find a way to work together. All the city can actually do is encourage businesses to come down there, because it's an opportunity. We declared it an opportunity zone, tax abatements, tax incentives, and try to work with them to come down into that area. That's all the city can do. Sometimes I do believe citizens believe that City Hall has more power than what it does. We're limited on what we can do, but we try to attract, we try to tempt and flirt with these businesses, but at the end of the day, we can't make businesses come down there. We're trying to do Riverside Park. That's going to be about a $24 million project. Oh, $27 million project. $27 million project, $24 million FEMA, and $3 million of the city. And we're trying to get that project going and finished so that we can improve the quality of life. I have worked with that individual, met with them that own 22 properties. I've tried to work with that person, and I will continue to trying hard to see our downtown area developed. But it's not easy. And I promise you, it will not happen in 12 months, 24 months, in my next term. It's not going to happen. Citizens have to understand that I voted last year on things that will not manifest maybe for 5 years. It takes time with the government to get things done. We're flirting with federal money now, trying to get $90 million to build a new water plant out there off of Major Drive. That's going to take years to get that done. But that's what you do every day. You work to try to get things done.
Terry Roy is asking, what is your stance on the Dowling Road extension?
Well, my desire is to see Beaumont grow and expand. We've got to take advantage of what's happening out there with Ford Park, that area. They sold Ford Park. You're hearing that in the news right now.
Right.
They're supposed to build a hotel, bring in maybe restaurants, and so that's going to benefit all the people of Beaumont. People that live, it's going to impact all 4 wards. Okay, all people will drive out. I mean, I'm assuming everybody in all 4 wards drive out there to go to Tinseltown or to eat at Papa Do's. That's not just impacting Ward 2 and 4, but it's impacting the entire city. So I'm hoping that area will begin to grow. So do I support the Dowling Road extension? I do, if it's done in the right manner, and if we can find a way to fund it. But ultimately, I believe that's going to have to be up to the citizens of Beaumont, because I don't know how we can get it done without raising taxes. It's a 3-leg project from I-10 to Walden to Washington, and connected to Dowling. So you're not going to get that done. That's a $35 million estimated project. I don't know how you get that done without raising taxes. So perhaps the best thing we to do is to put that for a vote before the citizens of Beaumont and let them vote on it. Probably the best thing to do would start at I-10 and do that first leg, probably around 10 million from I-10 to Walden Road, hoping you'll bring in growth, new businesses that will impact the quality of life for Beaumont. But
I understand, not to cut you off, that land was going to be a gift from the owners of that land.
Part of it is, but to go in there, to go from I-10 to Walden Road, you're to deal with the road, the infrastructure, the drainage, and all that's comes into play.
Right.
It
costs us.
It's going to be $10 million, I'm sure.
Right. It costs us. Let's go with the Faith. Faith is going to ask you about, since we talked about federal money, Faith says, who applies for the federal money for Darling back at that time, and why that road versus another road? When we talked about the Darling Road extension, when the feds
Darling Road, when they re-blacktopped it, you mean?
Yes.
That was before my administration. That's before I got on council. I would be speaking out of ignorance, and I really would hate to do that, to misinform citizens. That was before I got on council. I just know that it was said to me that was federal money, and it was my understanding that there were some limitations, as with all federal money. There's limitations placed on us that we have to do certain things in a certain way at a certain time. And so for me to get into the details, I apologize. But that was before I was on council, and I just can't speak to it intelligently.
I'm going to ask one more question from the comments box, and it's going to be from Irma Lynn Thomas. And she's asking, what is your stance on the dog park at Rogers Park?
Well, again, I campaigned last time, and I'll campaign this time and every other time that the citizens of Beaumont allow me to serve. And that is, we have to constantly improve the quality of life for our citizens. I feel like right now is not the right time for the dog park, because you're looking at a $100,000 ticket when we're coming out of a COVID-19 year, and we had a deficit within our budget. And my encouragement to Councilman Getz, when I sat down and he discussed this with me, I told him then that, look, a dog park, if that's a way to improve the quality of life for our citizens, it's only $100,000. You got $44 million in the general fund. I understand that's not a lot of money, but my word to him was, I really believe that now is not the time, because of the COVID-19, because of the drop in sales tax, hot tax, and so forth. This is just not the time. We need to come out of the COVID-19 season, and then maybe this is something that we could address in a later date.
Okay, thank you so much.
I don't have a dog, and let me say that I'm a dog lover, but at this time in my life, I can't have a dog. I'm just way too busy. I don't hate dogs. I love dogs, but it's just, for me, it was an issue of three things. Number one, following the process and the protocol to get it done. Number two, the timing of it. And number three, I think you have to pause and ask the other wards, what can be, do you need a dog park? And do you need a dog park in your ward? There has to be, you have to look at it across the board and make sure, again, that all the people of Beaumont feel like they're being represented.
Herbert Lane has one more question. What is the plan for a recreation facility for our children?
Can they go a little further with that? What are they referring to?
Maybe she's saying the plan for a recreation facility in the Ward 4 area.
We're talking about the old YMCA building. Is that a reference?
No, we're not talking about. She's wondering. I'm pretty sure she's stating this because of the recreation facility out on Magnolia and Gulf, and maybe she's asking that plan. What is your plan for a recreation facility for the children on the other side of town? Something like the old YMCA.
I don't know of any discussion right now. I apologize that I seem to be, I'm not connecting to her question.
Okay. She'll probably come back again. Girls, ladies, you like to ask Randy one more thing before we
No, I'm super excited. I think we got covered the things that we wanted to get covered, and I'm glad you came on. I'm happy that all of the technical difficulties got worked out because I was looking forward to it. I was like, he's not going to be able to come on. So I'm glad you made it.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate what you guys are doing for our city. I do believe that one thing we've got to get better at is how we at City Hall communicate to the citizens. And we've got to find a way to do that. And personally, I'm working on something now that I will roll out after May 1st if I'm reelected. I've been working on it, and something that I've actually, it's going to cost thousands of dollars to do it, and I'm paying for it personally. The city's not paying for it. My church is not paying for it. Something that I'm paying for personally to try to create a platform where we at City Hall can communicate to our citizens and try to address a lot of the misinformation that's going out there on social media.
I agree. But
And I appreciate, Tony, what you're doing.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate you too. And thank you for accepting our invitation. We've been with Randy Feldshau, City Councilman at Large. He's the incumbent, and he is running for re-election for the May 1st, 2021 election. Any final say, Randy? You want to share before we end our
Why should they pick you, sweetheart? We need to know.
Okay, let me say this, guys. Look, number one, the lady that's asking about the recreational facility for children, she can call me on my cell phone, 409-504-1730, 504-1730. That's my cell phone. You call me anytime. You can also go on my Facebook page, Randy for City Council. My website, again, Randy for City Council. Just type that in. It'll come up. Facebook, website. My email is Randy, the number 4, randy4citycouncil@gmail.com. Communicate to me. I try to answer every email. I take all my phone calls. I want citizens to feel like they can get in touch with me. But let me say this to you guys. Listen. We're looking at some major changes on our city council this time. A new mayor, at least 2 new ward positions, because Robin, 2 new seats. Because Robin is running for mayor, Ward 4 is got an empty seat. Because WL is running for mayor, there's 1 seat for at large that's open, okay? Ward 1 is the only one without an opponent, and then you got Ward 2 with an opponent. So we've got 2 seats plus a new mayor. We've got the potential for a lot of change on this council. The citizens of Beaumont need to pay attention, and the citizens of Beaumont need to come out and vote. You need to vote. You've got to vote this time. You've got to pay attention. I believe this time, this is probably the most critical election in recent history in Beaumont. Look at the people that are running across the board. I'm not talking about any one category or any one person. Look at all the candidates, including me. Look at all of them. Pay attention and vote. And know that this time, I think it's critical, as I said earlier, that we not only have managers that can manage ideals and projects, but we need leaders that can inspire people, that can bring the council together, that can help to push things forward. Because we're coming out of a COVID-19 time. We're coming out of a controversial presidential election. We've had rioting in our streets across the nation that impacted us here in Beaumont. We didn't have rioting in our streets, but we still had protesting. And we're a city that is still experiencing racial tension. And we have got to have leaders that can rally our city, change the attitude of our people. That's the wrong word. Give them hope. And change the narrative of Beaumont, because I'm tired of hearing people across Texas say that our city is not a good place to live. I'm tired of it. And I want people to realize how great Beaumont really is.
Randy Feldshau, everyone, City Council at Large. We thank you again, Randy. And we thank everyone for listening. And we'll be back on Sunday on Knowledge is Power Podcast Live. Thank you.
Thank you for watching Knowledge is Power Podcast Live. Be sure to like and subscribe to all Knowledge is Power social media pages.